Well, welcome back once again to another message from the Little Church World. We're very excited that you've tuned in today. We have a special message for you, and I pray that over the next 20 or so minutes, you will find a very personal blessing from this message. So stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you afterwards.
Hello and welcome to TLC World. This week I'm continuing with the theme of Christian maturity and looking specifically at the power of prayer. Mature Christians certainly believe that there is power in prayer. However, look at the evidence to examine whether they're right. The question is whether or not the act of praying actually has the power to change events and circumstances in this world. As part of the answer to this question, I'm going to share 3 stories. 2 from the Bible and 1 from modern life. The first story is from the Old Testament and involves one of the great kings of the Bible, King Hezekiah, who ruled the kingdom of Judah between 715 and 686 BC. Now this is what we read about him in Isaiah 38 verses 1 to 5. In those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, went to him and said, "This is what the Lord says, put your house in order because you are going to die. You will not recover." Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord, "Remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion and have done what is good in your eyes." And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Then the word of the Lord came to Isaiah. "Go and tell Hezekiah, this is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life." Hezekiah did indeed recover and survive for a further 15 years. The next story is taken from the New Testament and involves the Apostle Peter and a faithful Christian lady called Tabitha. In Acts 9 verses 36 to 40, we read, "In Joppa there was a disciple named Tabitha. Her Greek name is Dorcas. She was always doing good and helping the poor. About that time she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa, so when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, 'Please come at once.' Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Peter sent them all out of the room. Then he got down on his knees and prayed. Turning towards the dead woman, he said, 'Tabitha, get up.' She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up." Now there are actually 63 instances of answered prayer in the Bible. The third story involves a lady called Kathy, who phoned in to Focus on the Family, a major Christian organization that had asked people to call in about prayers that had been answered in their lives. These calls were transcribed, and here is Kathy's story. "Hi, my name is Kathy, and I'm calling from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I think some of the most exciting answers to prayer are the ones that our children witness. Once while traveling with my 2 boys, we stopped to stretch our legs, and when we came back to our car, it wouldn't start. We were 3 hours from home and 2 hours from our destination, and we didn't know a soul where we were. After trying to start the car several more times, I looked over at my oldest son, Tim, who was 5 at the time, and I said, 'We need to pray and ask God to make our car start.' After we prayed, I looked at Tim and I said, 'Well, here we go.' Would you believe the car started on the very first try? I wish you could have seen the look of surprise and wonder in my son's face. Because of that object lesson from heaven, he will never forget that God really does hear and answer our prayers. Whether for something very important or as simple as making a car start. This is an example of God being interested and involved in the little things in our lives. These three stories suggest that there is, in fact, power in prayer. Of course, if you are skeptical, you might think that the stories from the Bible have been fabricated, and that Kathy was either making up the story, or the fact that Kathy's car started after prayer was a mere coincidence. So, are the Bible stories made up? Last week I dealt with this very question when we looked at the issue of reading the Bible, and provided evidence that the events of the Bible have consistently been confirmed by archaeological evidence, supported by many in the scientific community, and that the New Testament was written by eyewitnesses and is 99.5% pure in relation to the original manuscripts. If you want to investigate this for yourself, a good starting point is to watch last week's message, a link to which is provided at the end of this message. Just as a case in point, my first story involved King Hezekiah, who up until recently had been thought by critics of the Bible to be a mythical character similar to the legendary King Arthur, whose existence in British history has never been confirmed. However, during an archaeological excavation in 2015, Hezekiah's royal seal was found in an ancient rubbish dump. Here is an extract from the Daily Mail on the 3rd of December 2015. A 2,700-year-old royal seal bearing the mark of the biblical King Hezekiah has just been unearthed in Jerusalem. And an inscription into the bulla or the seal reads, "Belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah." So King Hezekiah existed after all, and this finding is typical of the way that archaeology confirms the truthfulness of the Bible. We therefore have no reasonable basis for doubting the truth of what we read in the Bible, including the two stories I've shared. Should you doubt Kathy's story, all I can say is that hers was one of the numerous calls made to focus on the family on the day in question. And there are too many stories of answered prayers on the internet, for example, to discount all as mere fabrications. There has been much research focused on the power of prayer, and a 2007 study of the entire body of scientific research on the power of prayer, which is 17 major studies, has confirmed that prayer does have a positive effect on worldly outcomes. Some of these studies have involved hospital patients divided into prayed for groups and those not prayed for, with the prayed for groups being unaware of the fact that they were being prayed for and having no contact with the Christians praying for them. To take one example, cardiac patients from the San Francisco General Medical Center were randomly divided using a computer-generated list into two groups. The names of the patients in the test group were given to a group of Christians who prayed for them while they were in hospital. The results demonstrated that patients who were prayed for suffered less congestive heart failure, had fewer episodes of pneumonia, and had fewer cardiac arrests than those that were not prayed for. It's interesting to note that in a 2006 experiment that showed no effect of prayer, the Christians were given standardized prayers to pray. They were not happy with this, and Jesus' words in Matthew 6 verse 7 come to mind. "And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases." This could well account for the results of this particular study. Hopefully I've provided sufficient confirmation to Christ followers that they're right to believe in the power of prayer. And for those tuning into this message who are not yet believers, food for thought and further investigation. However, I want to share now some prayer principles for want of a better description. The first principle is that God always answers prayers, but not always in the way we expect or desire. I believe knowing this truth is one of the hallmarks of a mature Christian. We need to understand that God, the creator of the universe, sees the big picture, and that big picture will not always mean that our prayers will be answered exactly as we would wish. For example, I remember being separated from my wife and children at a time when we, as a family, had agreed that they move back to the UK, and that when I finished my contract in Hong Kong, which had not long to run, I would join them. During this time, a job came up for me in the UK, in our hometown where my wife and children were living. It seemed written for me, so I applied and we prayed that I would get the job. We were naturally disappointed when I did not get the job, but shortly after this, the department in which the job was housed closed, and if I had taken the job, I would have been unemployed. I was then unexpectedly given a new contract in Hong Kong, and my wife and children returned to join me, and all was well. God knew this. He saw the big picture. As God himself informs us in Isaiah 55 verse 8, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways." The second principle is to have no doubt. The power of prayer is grounded on solid, unwavering faith and confidence that the prayers will be answered in God's way, of course. I'm not suggesting that having unwavering faith is easy, especially when we are experiencing tough times. Nevertheless, God has no respect for doubters. James, the brother of Jesus, puts it this way in James 1 verses 6 to 8. "But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do." If we doubt that God can deliver on our prayers, we are effectively worshipping a God of our own creation, a small God, one who is not in control. Let's recall God's self-description in Job chapters 38 and 39. Here is just an extract from chapter 38 verses 4 to 11. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me, if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together, and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, 'This far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt.' This is my God. This is the God I believe in." Principle 3 recognizes that the power of prayer is grounded in righteousness. This righteousness is not to be confused with perfection. The Lord knows that we humans are weak and flawed vessels. Nevertheless, He is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love, as we read in Psalm 145 verse 8. He's only too ready to forgive we who are believers, His children, when we fail to live righteously but are repentant. His response through Jesus Christ is to forgive and to place us back on the road to glory. However, He deals in justice with continued unrighteousness, as we see in His dealings with the Israelites, who were punished for constant disobedience. This means we cannot expect to be living lives on our own terms, with values that justify all our actions, no matter how far short of God's standards they fall, and then expect our prayers to be answered. God's view of this is conveyed in Isaiah 29 verse 13, when He says, These people come near to me with their mouths and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. By contrast, we learn in James 5 verse 16 that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. In summary, I can say that I know there is power in prayer. Both the Bible and modern experience confirm this to be true. Furthermore, there is scientific evidence that indicates that prayer makes a difference to outcomes in this world. Nevertheless, while God always answers prayers, the way He answers them may not be as we would like or expect at times. However, I can state without a doubt that time will reveal to all that the way He answers our prayers is always perfect. Enlisting the power of prayer requires total confidence that He will answer our prayers, all the while living lives that glorify Him as much as is humanly possible. Recognition of all this is a mark of Christian maturity. If you're not yet a Christian, I hope that this message has given you food for thought and that you feel motivated to investigate the issues raised here further. If so, I suggest you contact a Christian you know and respect to discuss them. If this is not possible, then please feel free to contact me on goodnews@thelittlechurchworld.org and I'll be happy to help and discuss further. This then brings to a close the series on Christian maturity. Next week, we start a new series that focuses on the wisdom contained in the Bible. I hope you will join us. So until then, goodbye and God bless.
Well, this concludes yet another message from the Little Church World. Thank you for joining us, and I pray that this message was a blessing in your life. I urge you to spend some time this week in reflection and thought, trying to apply the lesson you've just learned to your life. Seek out a fellow Christian, family member, or friend who can help you in this process. If there is no one like this in your life, feel free to contact us at goodnews@thelittlechurchworld.org, and we would be more than happy to connect with you.